In a surprise move, RBI hikes repo rate by 0.4% to tame inflation. Repo rate hiked for the first time after 2 years. High interest rates to hit your pockets by making EMIs go up. RBI's actions spook stock markets with rate hike before U.S. Federal Reserve policy's decision tonight. Sensex sank 1,300 points. And all eyes on the outcome of the FOMC meet. Fed Chair Jerome Powell is expected to raise rates by 0.5 percentage point, even though the U.S. economy posted weaker GDP growth. 1,100 trains to remain cancelled until 24th May, says the Indian Railways, amidst domestic coal supply crisis. Power shortage expected to peak further. PM Modi makes a brief stopover in Paris to meet President Macron, concludes his 3-day Europe tour with Denmark trip, meets Prime Ministers of Norway, Sweden, Iceland and Finland. Amidst loudspeaker row, Aditya Thackeray issues a Lakshman Rekha warning to peace disruptors, takes a cryptic jibe at uncle Raj Thackeray, says one can revive political position by creating noise, but the person should know when to stop. Centre seeks more time to file counter affidavit in the plea challenging constitutional validity of sedition law. 1 week extension sought a day before hearing in Supreme Court. And it was Karan Johar's prank throughout. After announcing this morning that his show Coffee with Karan won't return, the Dharma producer adds a twist, makes a fresh revelation in the evening that his show will not return to TV, but on another OTT platform. Good evening. You're watching Beyond the Headline. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. The big headline everywhere today has been the shock decision by the Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikanta to announce an interest rate hike out of turn by 40 basis points. But why did the Reserve Bank decide to do this now? How is hiking interest rates going to even help with price rise? And is a rate hike going to be enough? These are some of the points we will be breaking down in today's show. But let's start at the beginning. At about 11:27 this morning, the Reserve Bank handle tweeted out that the governor would be making an announcement at 2 p.m. Now, for us journalists, this was an alarm bell. The schedule of when the governor speaks officially is released well in advance for the year. And an out-of-turn announcement took place last at the height of the COVID pandemic. So at 2 p.m., the governor goes on to announce a hike in the repo rate. That is the rate at which banks borrow from the Reserve Bank by 40 basis points. To put that in perspective, 100 basis points is about a percentage. So 40 basis points is exactly 0.40%. So what was the purpose of this interest rate hike and why now? This is what the governor explained.
There is the collateral risk that inflation remains elevated at these levels for too long. And if this kind of a scenario unfolds, then it can de-anchor inflation expectations, which in turn can become self-fulfilling and detrimental to growth and financial stability.
So here, let me just take a second to explain how this works. The Indian Central Bank is doing what all central banks do when faced with rising inflation. An interest rate hike is the best weapon in hand for any central banker. The idea is you make the cost of money higher. Banks have to then borrow at a higher rate. They will lend to you and me at a higher rate. We will presumably take fewer loans. So, for example, you may postpone the purchase of a new car on loan if you were planning to. That means demand will go down. And when demand drops, so do prices. The reason for now is that inflation has increased at a higher pace than expected. So in April, the Reserve Bank of India predicted that inflation for this year, from March 2022 till next April 2023, will be at 5.7%. In March, the CPI, that is the retail inflation, was at 6.95%. And that is the worry, the pace at which Mehengai is rising. So here is what inflation is doing to you. And I'm taking an example of, say, a plate of food. to explain what it's doing for you. So wheat, for example, is now increased about 15 to 20% in the last few months. The prices of vegetables have shot up nearly 12%. Edible oil has gone up close to 20%. Meat and fish has gone up by about 10%. And these are just a few items. If I add petrol, diesel, everything has become much, much more expensive. The question is, why has inflation gone up so aggressively? And mind you, that's not just our problem, it's the world's problem right now. There are two primary reasons. One, during COVID-19, central banks all over the world increased the amount of money in the system. They slashed interest rates and made sure businesses, borrowers could get easy loans to survive the impact of COVID. That has led to higher prices all around now. The second reason is this war between Russia and Ukraine, two nations that produce a significant amount of crude oil and wheat, both of which have become more expensive and have inflated prices for a host of products. So is this 40 basis points rate hike going to be enough? And can the RBI alone battle inflation? That is what we're discussing today. And speaking to me now on this is Swaminathan Aiyar, Senior Journalist, Dr. D.K. Pant, Chief Economist at India Ratings, Abhirup Sarkar, Senior Economist, is with us on the show. Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, National Vice President and Chairman Repo, is with us. We're going to try and understand why now and how much this helps. Let me begin by speaking with Swaminathan Aiyar. Swami sir, great to have you on the show on Beyond the Headlines, where we attempt to really break down what a news story means and why it matters. So in that context, were you surprised that the RBI decided to do it today, and was it too little too late as far as the rate hike is concerned?
Yes, I would say this is somebody saying, oops, I have missed the bus, and they are then running desperately to catch up with that bus. They should have been alerted to the problem much earlier. But it seems to me that earlier they were afraid of doing so, because this particular central bank, at the instance of the finance ministry, has been saying we are going to emphasize growth over inflation. And that although the Monetary Policy Committee is supposed to target inflation, they have thought that growth is more important, and they want to revive the economy. Nirmala Sitharaman had said, we're going to have a great year. We're going to be the fastest growing in the world. The Reserve Bank didn't want to be seen spoiling the party. And as for inflation, as we know, food and fuel, by and large, cannot be influenced much by raising interest rates. Other things may be. And this particular inflation did have a high content of food and fuel. And for these reasons, the Reserve Bank said, well, let me hesitate. Not only that, I think they saw that the world over central banks had been dragging their feet. Now the world over central banks are panicking. In the United States, 2% is the target. And they said, let it go to 3, let it go to 4, and, it will even out. And then they went to 8.5. So there's a kind of sense of panic in America. That same sense of panic is echoing around the whole world, saying, we have missed the bus, let us run and catch up. So that explains why it is now. As for the amount of the hike, earlier they were talking about 25 basis points. Now in India, it's 40 basis points. You may find the subsequent hikes will be 50. I would say in America, I would expect the Fed to have increased the total number of hikes by up to 3 percentage points by the end of 2023. And I think you will find that the Reserve Bank of India will go in the same direction and about the same amount.
So you're saying we could have much more coming in terms of rate hikes and, see it as high as 3%. I want to break this down a little bit for our viewers, because when we talk about inflation, interest rates, a large number of viewers tend to think that this is too esoteric. What does it have to do with me? Well, it has everything to do with you. This is how it's going to impact you. Dr. Pant, what does this mean for the average Indian? I mean, we know the obvious. The borrower will have to pay higher interest rates. The savers, if they still believe in fixed deposits, will get a little bit more. But is it enough to battle inflation? Because inflation is what is eating into everyone's savings, isn't it?
Well, Tamanna, it is going to impact everyone. And right now, what we are struggling with, I'll just take you back in last fiscal year. the kind of revenue buoyancy or revenue collection we had seen, tax to GDP ratio touched again all-time high of touched 2008-9 mark. What was it? It was not all because of the growth. It was also because of inflation tax. Higher inflation is eating everybody's budget. And more so, if you look at higher inflation leading to higher indirect taxes, so basically what it is doing, more than people like us, all five of us who are in this program, on face of it and on the background, the people, those at the bottom of the pyramid, their savings are almost non-existent. So basically what it is doing, the higher inflation, it is cutting down on or taxing people at the bottom of the pyramid very hard. Now, what happens is the classical overheating example we had seen in 2009 and 2010. For some time, we will see higher inflation will give you higher growth, but after that, growth will start coming down. The moment growth starts coming down, it hit us and it hit us very badly. So other than your and my EMI on the vehicle, on the car, or the anybody who was trying to find think of buying a new house. So Dr. Hiranandani is here; he can explain it more.
Yeah.
All those things, as you rightly said in the beginning, the demand will be controlled, and once the demand control and supply, but at the same time, if we are just doing the demand side or supply side management, it is again going to lead us to problem. If with the demand side management, we don't continue our focus and continue to improve supply side, then what is going to happen is when the demand will start rising after some time, there will be no supplies. And again, we will be struggling with the same thing. Right now, though, it's the bout of inflation coming from the food, coming from the oil. It's more a supply side.
So 1 minute, I want to break this down and make it a little simpler. Let me go across to Mr. Sarkar for this. Now, we know that everyone is battling inflation. The question in the Indian context is that could something have been done earlier to ease the burden on the common man? Is this interest rate hike the best way? And will this be enough?
To understand your question, to answer your question, it is first necessary to understand what is behind this inflation. Inflation is something that we have to take seriously, no doubt about that. But whether demand factors are there or supply factors, which are the more important factors? Demand factors would mean that there has been an expansion in the monetary base by lowering interest rates. During the lockdown period, several subsidies were provided on interest rates. So it is possible that people were taking more loans and that expanded the bank deposits, and that led to inflation. That is one possibility. The other possibility is that due to the recent war, due to the recent rise in oil prices, and due to the recent disruption in world movement of goods, there is a supply side shock, and that is creating inflation. Now, if we are convinced that the major factors are coming from the demand side, as is probably the case in the United States, they had expanded their monetary base quite a bit. So if we are concerned that it's demand side factors, then raising the interest rate would help. If it's supply side, then I'm not so sure. So I think it's more the supply side. You see, there has not been a significant expansion in bank credit during the lockdown period. So if it's the supply side, then one has to be very careful before one raises the rate of interest. Because if you raise the rate of interest, there is a further fall in demand, which will probably cut back inflation, but it will also reduce output and employment, which are equally important things. So first of all, my first point is that we have to make sure whether the demand side factors are important or the supply side,
Yes.
or which one is more important. And the second is the Reserve Bank of India should come up with a rule rather than a discretion. It's a tailored rule that everyone is following, but the weightage varies from.
Okay, no, 1 minute. So let me break down the supply side thing. And I know I have a panel full of economists and people who are experts in their field. But gentlemen, I request you, let's keep it simple that people can understand. I think it's very important to break down and bring economic issues to people, because that is what really impacts their day-to-day life. If you're wondering that even though on paper you may be getting paid more year by year, but you still can afford less and less, and you're wondering what happened to your life, well, we're trying to explain to you what happened to your life and why you still can't afford as much as you thought you would by this time. The supply side situation, Mr. Hiranandani, let me come to you on that. So, for example, I know costs of homes have gone up, cost of building it has gone up, cement, steel prices, everything has gone up. Now, we're expecting that demand will be dampened, will be hit a little bit with increasing interest rates for borrowers who want to buy homes, right? Home loan rates will go up. Will you be able to reduce prices to match up?
No, Tamanna. In fact, the prices of real estate have gone up, especially in the affordable housing segment. Steel prices have gone up, cement prices have gone up, labor costs have gone up, all inputs and fuel costs have gone up. So in reality, all the prices in terms of home costs have gone up, and definitely the prices of housing has gone up. This may result in some sort of contraction in demand, but if that takes place, then there is a hit on employment also, which is likely to do it, because we are the second largest employer in the market after agriculture. And all the growth expectations is not in agriculture, but in housing and in infrastructure. So I think the negative effect is there. Having said that, I think the instrument available with the governor in terms of controlling inflation is obviously the interest rate hike, which is there and which is done by them as well as by other central banks in all around the world. And that is the thing to be done. But we have to see three things which are happening. Number one, that most of the inflation is imported. We are importing oil, we are doing edible oils. All these are not going to be reduced because you have increased the interest rates and all that. And there's hardly any flexibility in demand in terms of reducing the demand in these two segments for the marketplace. So that's the first important thing to understand, that it's not possible for the monetary policy alone to be able to control inflation, especially when it is relating to Russia-Ukraine war and the other aspects of it. So we need to actually, if we want to handle this issue, I think they need to combine the monetary policy with an intervention by the government of India and the state governments in terms of fiscal policy. So you got to reduce import taxes, you got to reduce excise duty, your GST needs to be reduced for some temporary period. You have a war-like situation. You had a COVID situation. Now you have a war-like situation where this inflation is going to create a problem in the economy, and it's going to hurt growth ultimately and bring about a contraction in demand.
Yeah.
So my view is that while what the governor has done is correct, because that's the instrument available with the RBI. They have no other instrument really in order to do it, and they can only raise interest rates to reduce home loan demand, reduce car demand. But can you reduce food demand? Can you reduce the demand for petrol or diesel or whatever?
Swami, you want to come in on this? Is interest rate hike at this stage going to be enough? And what about fiscal measures?
Yeah, so we need...
One second, I want to get Swami in on this point. Yes.
Yes.
Well, without doubt, there are fiscal measures, of which, I mean, some you are already seeing. There is, in effect, a big increase in the subsidy being given to fertilizers. In effect, the tax rates on fuel have come down and may come down further. The most important, I think, is the continuing of the free rations. if you say that the poor people are going to be most affected, if you can continue with the free rations all the way till December, then that substantially mitigates the impact of inflation. Surjit Bhalla, Arvind Nirvani, they had a paper out recently, as you know, how the impact of this rations dramatically reduces the burden on the poor people. This is true in the USA also. So I think these are the measures you will see that the government will come out with. Now, they are not going to bring down prices dramatically. All that they can do is prevent prices from rising as sharply as they otherwise would. Because let's be clear, if there is a shortage globally, that shortage cannot be wished away in India. If there is a problem globally, you cannot say the rest of the world is distressed, but India will somehow escape distress. You will have to share in that particular thing. So as I said, ultimately the solution is to bring the war to an end, which is beyond the internal things of India. All that we can do is the palliatives in the form of you can cut some taxes to bring down, to hold the fuel prices, and you can continue with free food rations. That will help. But beyond that, let's be clear. We have to gird our loins saying the world is going through a difficult time. We cannot escape difficult times.
No, so Dr. D.K. Pant, what else can be done at this point, and does this rate hike then make any sense? I mean, today the different kinds of headlines coming out of the story, and I'm talking about headlines because that's the theme of the show. We go beyond the headlines. So one is for the Aam Aadmi, for the middle class, now you pay more for your EMIs. So if you, for example, were planning to buy a car, you have no discounts or no relief on petrol, diesel, and that cost of financing that car has also gone up. So the Indian middle class has been burdened even further. One can only hope that the bottom of the pyramid will get more food subsidies. Anyone running a business today has to borrow at a higher cost to finance their business. So how is this helping the Indian people at this point?
Tamanna, one way it is helping is, had we not raised rates today, and we know few hours from now, we'll have the Fed outcome coming, and most likely 50 basis point, or some people are very aggressive talking about even 75 bips. Now, had that situation been there, and the interest rate arbitrage between India and US remains high, we would have seen our currency weakening. Now, what has happened is, because of this rate hike, the currency weakness, which was expected, because otherwise there would have been 40, which we have increased, and 50, which they will increase. Had we not increased, that arbitrage may have gone up by 90 bips or may have shrunk. Now, this is the way, because you know what happens. We all talk about oil being at 100 or 106 or 110, and looks like, okay, it was 80, from 80 to 110. But what we face, what consumers face, is the rupee prices. And on top of it, if 10% commodity price hike in the global, in the dollar pricing, and on top of it, if we are looking at 5% currency depreciation, what we are hitting at, or what is hitting us, is roughly 15 to 15.5% rupee denominated price rise. Now, if we can control that rupee depreciation by interest rate hike or by the monetary policy, then what we are going to see, maybe instead of 15 or 15.5, 12% or so. Right now, with the large fiscal deficit, what government can do, because the moment it go for a loose fiscal policy, then what is going to happen? A tight monetary policy along with loose fiscal policy is not going to give you result. So we already in a loose fiscal policy era, and if we lose it further, it may give us in the short run some benefit, but in medium to long run, it is going to affect our growth harder.
So, you know, right now, the RBI, the government is trying to balance growth, is trying to balance inflation. A low growth, high inflation is hurting everyone. Give us an economic outlook, Abhirup Sarkar. For people who are watching this right now, Swaminathan Aiyar said we have to gird our loins for what is coming. So are we looking at truly tough times at an everyday level? We will perhaps be spending more, perhaps not earning higher, and everything will become more expensive?
First of all, let me point out that a higher rate of interest is not a curse to everyone. It's a
Yes.
boon to some. Like people like me, for example, senior citizens who depend on their savings for their expenses, to run their daily expenses. They will be better off, clearly. And also, if, as has already been said, if the government continues with the food programs, with the free rations and so on, the bottom level would be protected. Now, what about the middle level? I think it's time to go for fiscal policies. So fiscal policies should be combined with monetary policies, or rather, more importance should be attached on fiscal policies, because I would like to point out that both in advanced countries as well as in India, there has been a steady rise in the debt to GDP ratio. However, rate of interests have not risen in response to that. There could be several reasons for that. I'm not going into that. But what I want to point out that government, this is the time when the government can expand its loan, expand its debt. It can take more loans to reduce taxes. That will ease out the situation for the people. And that is unlikely to create an effect on the rate of interest. It's unlikely to raise the rate of interest further. So if the government can do that, there is enough empirical evidence for that. So if the government can use fiscal policy, I think that would be the best.
No, so what do you mean by fiscal policy? I think we should say this more clearly. Fiscal policy means what? Make
reduction of taxes.
Yes.
Mainly reduction of taxes and financing of projects, infrastructure projects, which the budget talks about, by taking loans rather than increasing the monetary base.
So let's first reduce taxes as well, not just interest rate hikes. Let's cut perhaps further excise and VAT on fuel. Let's see if there is any scope on GST to give some relief. Niranjan Hiranandani, are you hoping for all of these things to happen to be able to brace the impact of this interest rate hike, which seems to be the first of many to come?
Well, as all the great economists have already said, if we want to combine the GDP growth along with the economic interests in terms of taking care of inflation, I don't think there's any option really for the government to do. Look at the collections. 1,42,000 crores of rupees. This is all based on inflationary prices which have gone up. And based on that, this collection is taking. If a part of that can be used for the purposes of reduction of the prices, automatically the same thing which Mr. Sarkar is talking about can come through a reduction in the GST. It can be a temporary measure till Ukraine-Russia war, till the prices of fuel is above $100. I think if they link it with these two issues, automatically a benefit would go to the people, and that itself would reduce inflation immediately. So I think along with the Honorable Governor's monetary policy, I think the fiscal policy, reducing GST, reducing some taxes, some VAT, needs to be taken up if you really want growth with controlling inflation. I think a combination of this is there. I think Mr. Sarkar has clearly indicated fiscal policy. I think Dr. Pant has also mentioned about it, and Mr. Aiyar has talked about it through giving benefits to the poorer of poor. But what happens to the middle class?
Yep.
Unless they are not given the benefit in terms of it, you pay higher EMI for your home, higher EMI for your car, you pay more for your petrol, you pay more for everything. Yes, of course, the poorest must be benefited. I'm not against that. In fact, I'm totally in favor of that part of it. But the middle class also needs to be benefited.
Swami, let's talk about that for a second. What happens to the middle class who gets, sort of smashed between two ends always?
No, I think this is, this is wishful thinking that I'm hearing. The idea that somehow if you do something, you can escape the pain. Please stop this. You are going to suffer. There is going to be pain. don't pretend that if only you're so clever, you're going to get away from the pain. I said, some minimal thing you can say, if you reduce some fuel taxes, for instance, that can help the middle class. But this does not mean that the price will come down. It may simply mean that the price does not go up as much as possible.
Yeah.
Be very clear that there is pain in the global economy. You are going to suffer pain and you cannot escape the pain. May I add that the idea that you cut tax, cut GST, please, even before the war began, you had a situation where the fiscal deficit of the center and states put together was something like 11% of GDP, which is one of the highest in the world. There are many countries that have gone bust with a fiscal deficit of no more than 5-6%. So we are already in a precarious situation as far as that is concerned. People have got used to the idea that, you can run as large fiscal deficits as you like. It does not affect things. No, it affects, and it affects inflation, and it will affect foreign money. In India, we will not pay attention to it. The middle class may not be aware of it. But if the fiscal deficit is seen getting out of control, you can get an enormous additional rush of money out of India, saying this country does not know how to manage its finances.
No, let's look at what's happening to Sri Lanka.
Infinitely worse.
Yeah, let's look at what's happening to Sri Lanka. So, yes, a little wishful thinking there by you, Mr. Hiranandani. But I think we can't ignore what Swami is saying. The pain is coming. Let's try and minimize it to whatever extent you can. Perhaps, as Abhirup Sarkar is saying, if you find a way to make the most of hiked interest rates with the way you save, that may cushion the blow a bit. Just maybe. Meanwhile, brace for more interest rate hikes. We'll take a very short break, but on the other side of the show, we're coming back with all the top stories of the day. Don't go away. Welcome back. Some breaking news coming in. We know that we're going through a power crisis and there's a shortage of coal. One of the ways that the government is dealing with that shortage of coal is making sure that there is more efficient supply of coal to the power plants that need them. So the number of rakes being utilized for this has been increased. We're now learning that because of the domestic coal supply crisis and the shortage of rakes, more trips by trains will be cancelled. In fact, 1,100 journeys, trains will remain cancelled till the 24th of May. And the reason is that the power shortage is expected to peak even further. So one of the ways to deal with that, and what the government has been doing, what the railways has been doing, is diverting some of these passenger trains expressly to transport coal. My colleague Kundan is joining us on the phone line with more details on this. Kundan, what are the reasons being given, and can this 1,100 number increase?
या बिल्कुल, जिस तरीके से लगातार ट्रिप्स के नंबर्स यानी कि ट्रेन कैंसिलेशंस के नंबर्स बढ़ते जा रहे हैं, ये साफ इंडिकेट कर रहा है कि कोल क्राइसिस कंटिन्यू बना हुआ है और इस कोल क्राइसिस को हैंडल करने के लिए रेलवे के पास पैसेज चाहिए और वो टाइम फ्रेम में पैसेंजर ट्रेन को प्रायोरिटी न देते हुए वो फ्रेट को लेके यानी कोल के रैक को लेके थर्मल पावर स्टेशन तक लेके जाएंगे। और शायद यही वजह है कि आपने देखा था कि पिछले वक्त में हमने देखा था कि खासकर छत्तीसगढ़, मध्य प्रदेश और झारखंड के इलाकों से ट्रेनों को कैंसिल किया गया था, लेकिन इस बार पैन इंडिया खासकर महाराष्ट्र में, गुजरात में, मध्य प्रदेश के बहुत सारे इलाकों में ट्रेनों को कैंसिल किया गया है। और अगर आप अभी आज प्रेजेंट ट्रिप्स की बात करें तो 1100 ट्रिप्स यानी आने वाले एक महीने पूरे मई और जून के वक्त में लगातार ट्रेनों को कैंसिल किया गया। इस साफ इंडिकेट करता है कि जो रैक की ढुलाई है रेलवे के पास, जो लिमिटेड रैक है और लिमिटेड रैक को जल्दी से जल्दी पहुंचाने के लिए जो पाथवे है वो पाथवे खाली किया जा रहा है और इसी को लेके आज ये लेटेस्ट निर्णय किया गया है। टाइम्स नाउ के पास अपने पास एक्सक्लूसिव जानकारी है कि ये जो एक्सटेंशन है वो आने वाले वक्त में और बढ़ाया जा सकता है, क्योंकि लगातार कोल का जो स्टॉक है वो लिमिटेड है और उसको बढ़ाने की बेहद जरूरत है देश में। मेंटेन करने के लिए।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया कुंदन सारी जानकारी के लिए. So that's the update. Another 1100 trips will be cancelled so as to transport coal. That could be an indication that the power crisis is set to deepen. Let's shift our focus now to two horrific cases of child rape and assault that have been reported from Delhi and Uttar Pradesh. In both these instances, minor girls were assaulted at their school, at their center for learning, and at a police station, which otherwise should be a safe haven for everyone. Let's take you through the tales of these horror stories. So first, what happened in Uttar Pradesh? A shocking case. A 13-year-old girl was first gang raped in Bhopal and then dropped off at a police station where she was allegedly sexually assaulted again. This time at the station house officer, by the station house officer inside the police station. The NHRC has issued notices to the Chief Secretary and the DGP seeking a report within 4 weeks. Meanwhile, the absconding SHO has now been arrested from Prayagraj. And the opposition launched a scathing attack on the UP government over the alleged gang rape of the minor inside a police station. Congress leader Priyanka Gandhi took a jibe at the government, saying the incident shows how genuine law and order reforms are being suppressed in the noise of bulldozers. Meanwhile, Samajwadi Party chief Akhilesh Yadav has left for Lalitpur to meet the survivor's family. He too is questioning the UP government's alleged instant justice model lately, saying if Yogi's officials will bulldoze police stations after the station in charge was arrested for a minor's rape.
और पुलिस की पहली घटना नहीं है, चंदौली आपके सामने है, गोरखपुर में एक व्यापारी के साथ घटना हुई वो आपके सामने है, हाथरस की घटना आपके सामने है. आखिरकार पुलिस को क्या हो गया? और ये सब बीजेपी की सरकार जिम्मेदार है इसके लिए. और मुख्यमंत्री आवास पता नहीं कैसी दीवारें बन गई हैं जो चीख पुकार और परेशानी दुख दर्द नहीं समझ पा रहे हैं कि आखिरकार उत्तर प्रदेश किस दिशा में जा रहा है. और एक जगह की घटना नहीं, हर जगह आप देख सकते हो.
देखिए, आज एक बड़ी कामयाबी पुलिस के हाथ लगी है. जो आरोपी थानाध्यक्ष है तिलक राज सरोज, उसे गिरफ्तार कर लिया गया है. प्रयागराज में उसकी लोकेशन ट्रेस की गई. उसके बाद ललितपुर पुलिस और प्रयागराज पुलिस के सहयोग से उसे धर दबोचा गया है. उस पर आरोप था एक माइनर बच्ची के रेप का, जिसकी जिम्मेदारी थी इंसाफ दिलाना, कानूनी कार्रवाई करना. लेकिन इसके उलट उसने बजाय सहायता करने के, इसके उलट उसने एक गुनाह किया. हालांकि अभी जो बाकी आरोपी हैं, जिसमें लड़की की मौसी है, वो और 4 वो आरोपी जिन्होंने लड़की को बहला फुसला कर भोपाल ले गए थे और वहां पर उसके साथ कई दिन तक रेप किया था. अभी पुलिस उनकी तलाश कर रही है. कई टीमें गठित की गई हैं. पीड़िता के परिजनों की तहरीर के बाद एफआईआर दर्ज कर ली गई थी. डीआईजी मौके पर मौजूद हैं. उन्हें तब तक कैंप करने को कहा गया है जब तक सभी आरोपी गिरफ्तार नहीं हो जाते. एडीजी लॉ एंड ऑर्डर हर अपडेट पर नजर रखे हुए हैं. शासन से भी रिपोर्ट तलब की गई थी और किसी भी स्तर पर कोई कोताही न बरती जाए, इसके पूरे निर्देश दिए गए हैं.
And the Delhi Commission for Women today issued a notice to the Delhi Police and the East Delhi Municipal Corporation Commissioner over a case of sexual assault of 2 8-year-old girls in a civic body-run primary school. The Commission has sought details on the action taken against the school principal and the class teacher under the POCSO Act. Let's get you the details of the case. Now, this was on April 30th when a man allegedly entered the classroom of the school in East Delhi and sexually assaulted 2 girls.
This is absolutely a grave and horrifying incident which has happened at the East MCD school where 2 girls, both were minor, were assaulted. An unidentified man barged into classroom and asked them to remove their clothes and removed his clothes. And when the students tried to complain to their teachers, they ignored them and tried to conceal the matter. And only after a lot of pressure, this matter has came into the light. This is a horrifying matter. As school, which is supposed to be a safe place, and there also girls are not safe. This raises a lot of questions. Now the Delhi Commission of Women has written to Delhi police so that they could identify that man as soon as possible and also take strict action against this person.
Now, as the NEET exam date is out, thousands of doctors have expressed their grievances and have urged the centre to postpone the national eligibility cum entrance test. The doctors have requested the centre to postpone the NEET PG 2022 for a reasonable period of time so that the current NEET PG 2021 aspirants get enough time to prepare for this. In their letter to the Prime Minister and the President, the students have mentioned that if the exam is not postponed, then they will surrender their degree to the government at Rashtrapati Bhavan. However, there's two sides to the NEET PG 2022 exam protest. On one hand, the Federation of Resident Doctors Association wants to continue with the exam, whereas on the other, the Federation of All India Medical Association is in support of the delay.
We must understand that for this exam, lakhs of students appear and the seats are only 38,000 in India completely, and out of which 19,000 is for Government of India. So the students have the major concern that they do not understand that since last time it was postponed from March to May, citing the very same reason that the counselling was not over of the previous year, that is 2021 counselling, that reason is still holding value today also, and it is not over.
It's time now to course correct. We are now seeing the lower ebb of the Omicron wave. We finished approximately close to 190 crores vaccines. We've reached a level of community-acquired immunity. We need to get the NEET exam back in action. We need to continue with it. Yes, there will be some amount of overlap and some amount of obstacles which will come across in a way, but the sooner we get back to the normal system is better. This is otherwise going to delay hundreds and thousands of young doctors who have to join the residency program and the PGs. So I think it's important that we continue with it. To blackmail a government to say that we're going to surrender our degrees, I don't think it's an appropriate way forward.
And Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin finally seems to have got his way in the NEET bill centre. It's been sent to the centre for the President's assent. Making a big announcement in Assembly today, the CM informed that the Governor R.N. Ravi has forwarded the NEET exemption bill passed by the Tamil Nadu Assembly for the second time.
That's very true. In fact, the Tamil Nadu government constituted a committee under retired Justice A.K. Rajan to study the impact of NEET examination. So many students and parents from Tamil Nadu have, told that they do not want this particular entrance examination for admission into medical colleges. So now today in Tamil Nadu Assembly, Chief Minister M.K. Stalin announced that Governor R.N. Ravi has actually forwarded the anti-NEET bill that was passed in the Assembly to the Union Home Ministry for presidential approval. So this is a very, very important move as far as Tamil Nadu's attempts to get an exemption from the NEET examination is concerned. So the Chief Minister further stated that Tamil Nadu will do everything in its power to, to get the presidential approval also, because now that the bill has been forwarded to the Union Home Ministry for presidential approval, the next step is to get the presidential approval itself. So he told that his government will do everything in its power to get the presidential approval also. So this particular move has given some kind of relief to the parents and students of Tamil Nadu, because they have been in a very confused state as far as this anti-NEET bill is concerned, as there was no clarity as to what's going to happen. But now we are seeing a step ahead in the government's attempts to get an exemption.
Now, we've been tracking the Chennai custodial death closely and have accessed the post-mortem report of Vignesh, who allegedly died in police custody on April 19th in Chennai. According to the post-mortem report, Vignesh had multiple injuries on his body. 13 injuries have been listed in the report, including abrasion on his gluteal region, fractures on his right tibial bone being some of them. Earlier, the National SC/ST Commission had slammed the police over the Chennai custodial death case. The SC/ST Commission, VC Arun Haldar, said the police wanted to suppress the fact that Vignesh was from the SC community and that they delayed invoking the SC/ST Act. The VC also said apart from the three officials, the SHO should also be suspended in the case.
पुलिस इंचार्ज इस पे बच नहीं सकता है। वो 3 लोगों को सस्पेंड कर दिया, उनको तो जिम्मेदारी है, उनके थाना में हुआ घटना, वो भी हम लोग अभी बता के जा रहे हैं इनको। ये केस भी सीरियसली कमीशन देखेगा और उसके बाद देखना चाहिए, हम लोग भी देखेंगे तमिलनाडु गवर्नमेंट क्या स्टेप ले रहा है, उसके बाद कमीशन का ऑब्जर्वेशन हम लोग भेजेंगे। ने उनको उस पर एट्रोसिटी एक्ट लगा दिया, PO प्रिवेंशन ऑफ एट्रोसिटी, उसमें इस परिवार का अभी कॉम्पेंसेशन मिल जाएगा, इमीडिएट मिल जाएगा। उनका सर्टिफिकेट शो किया है, पुलिस ने सबसे ये काम किया है जो शेड्यूल कास्ट है क्या नहीं इसमें उन लोगों का शौक था, लेकिन मैंने पहले से ही पूरा रिपोर्ट लेके उनको सर्टिफिकेट डायरेक्ट हाथ में पकड़ दिया, तो उसको जाने का कोई जगह नहीं था। अभी उस परिवार को एट्रोसिटी लगने के बाद 4.25 लाख इमीडिएट उनको मिलेगा उस परिवार को। और जो अभी जेल में है, मैं इमीडिएट इधर से निकल के जेल में वो लड़का के साथ बात करने के लिए जा रहा था, जाने अभी जाएंगे उसको जेल में, क्योंकि मेरे को लग रहा है कि किसी कारण से उनको जेल में भेज दिया है, कि वो डायरेक्ट उनके साथ में था। इसी के बाद मेरा जस्टिफाई करने के लिए बहुत सुविधा हो जाएगा, इसलिए मैंने बोला मैं जेल में जाके उनसे मिलेंगे।
In fact, right now we have accessed the post-mortem report of Vignesh, who allegedly died due to police torture here in Chennai. In fact, the post-mortem report has confirmed that Vignesh suffered multiple injuries on his body, to be precise 13 injuries. So 13 injuries have been reported in the post-mortem report of Vignesh as we talk. And you know, most of these injuries is black in color. So that's what the post-mortem report is saying. Most of these 13 injuries are black in color. And Vignesh also seems to have suffered a fracture on his right tibial bone. And apart from that, there's also an abrasion on his genital region. So these are some of the very specific details that are getting that we are getting from the post-mortem report of Vignesh, who allegedly died due to the Chennai police custodial torture.
And senior Congress leader, former Union Minister and advocate P. Chidambaram had to face protests from lawyers and party supporters at the Calcutta High Court today for representing agro-processing firm Keventer, alleging that Chidambaram is playing with the sentiment of the Congress party. The lawyers claimed it was not appropriate for him to represent the company when West Bengal Congress chief Adhir Chaudhary is fighting the case, challenging the Trinamool Congress's government sale of shares of Metro Dairy to the private company. And the Supreme Court today directed the Maharashtra Election Commission to announce the schedule for the Maharashtra municipal polls. The top court asked the state poll panel to also file a compliance affidavit within 2 weeks. Earlier, the State Election Commission had told the top court that local body elections in Maharashtra could not be held in time.
सुप्रीम कोर्टानं सांगितलं की अगोदर जे आहेत हे तुम्ही मागच्या ज्या निवडणुका रखडलेल्या आहेत त्या 2 आठवड्यामध्ये त्यांचा कार्यक्रम जाहीर करा. आता त्या संदर्भातलं जे सगळं काही जी माहिती जी आहे आम्ही वकिलांशी बोलतो आहोत आणि निश्चित काय ऑर्डर आहेत, कशा प्रकारची ऑर्डर आहे त्यांनी दिलेली आहे, तर त्याचा अभ्यास करून राज्य सरकार आम्ही पुढची पावलं टाकू.
And amidst the loudspeaker row, Aditya Thackeray, State Minister in the government of Maharashtra, has issued a Lakshman Rekha warning to peace disruptors. He took a cryptic jibe at Uncle Raj Thackeray. He said one can revive a political position by creating noise, but the person should know when to stop.
इथे महाराष्ट्रात काही विरोधी पक्ष असतील किंवा इतर पक्ष असतील ते अशा गोष्टींवर बोलत आहेत जेणेकरून लोकांचं लक्ष विचलित करण्याची एक प्रयत्न मला वाटतं सुरू आहे. थोडी अस्थिरता निर्माण करण्याचा प्रयत्न सुरू आहे. महाराष्ट्राची जनता हुशार आहे, कुठेही याला बळी पडणार नाही. पण माझं मत एवढंच आहे की कुठेही भांडणे निर्माण करून डिवाइड अँड रूलचा प्रयत्न करून किंवा दंगलसारखं काहीतरी घडवण्याचं करून देशाचं नाव जगभरात खराब होतंय हे लक्षात घेऊन आपण पुढे काम केलं पाहिजे. आपली जी काही राजकीय संधी असते स्वतःला रिवाइव्ह करायची असेल किंवा काही सरकारवर टीका करायची असेल ती टीका झाली पाहिजे. काही चुकत असेल त्याच्यावर बोललं गेलं पाहिजे. पण किती भांडणं लावायची समाजामध्ये, समाज किती विखुरला गेला पाहिजे ह्याच्यावर कुठेतरी एक आपण स्वतःहून लक्ष्मण रेखा आणली पाहिजे.
And Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a brief stopover in Paris to meet French President Emmanuel Macron. This meeting comes as PM Modi concluded his 3-day Europe tour with his Denmark trip. He also met Prime Minister of Norway, Sweden, Iceland and Finland on the trip.
This is indeed his last leg, the last day of his 3-day tour. Very busy, action-packed day for the Prime Minister. And this meeting with Emmanuel Macron will again build on the trust, a high level of trust that is there between New Delhi and Paris. And it has only deepened over the years because of the numerous defense deals that the countries have signed over the years. France has emerged as a very dependable and a very important ally for India in terms of defense and arms deals. In fact, we understand that around 12 billion euro worth of deals have been signed. This is just before the pandemic.
And U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has slammed the draft U.S. Supreme Court decision that would overturn federal abortion rights, declaring that women's rights in America are under attack. Harris argued that a court decision to end the national right to abortion, if it happens, would open the door to the justices stripping away other rights, including same-sex marriage. The draft decision, which was leaked Monday night, would overturn the 1973 Roe v. Wade case that legalized abortion nationwide. Vice President Kamala Harris is now hitting out at that draft U.S. Supreme Court's decision.
Women's rights in America are under attack. If the court overturns Roe v. Wade, it will be a direct assault on freedom. Roe protects the right to access abortion. It also protects a woman's right to make decisions about what she does with her own body.
And the European Union is proposing to ban all oil imports from Russia by the end of the year and remove the country's biggest bank from the SWIFT international payments network. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on Wednesday that the measures would form part of a sixth round of sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine.
We will make sure that we phase out Russian oil in an orderly fashion, so in a way that allows us and our partners to secure alternative supply routes and at the same time be very careful that we minimize the impact on the global market. And this is why we will phase out Russian supply of crude oil within 6 months and refined products by the end of the year. Thus, we maximize the pressure on Russia, while at the same time, and this is important, we minimize the collateral damage to us and our partners around the globe, because to help Ukraine, we have to make sure that our economy remains strong.
And the filmmaker Karan Johar almost convinced everyone that his popular talk show Coffee with Karan will not return. No conjecture there, but then every great story needs a good twist is what he said a few hours later after announcing that the show is not coming out anymore. He then shared a fresh statement in which he said that the new season of the talk show will stream now on Disney Hotstar only. Well, that's perhaps his way of getting interest going in that format. But that's all the time we have on this edition of Beyond the Headline. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Stay tuned.